and I'll ask Ashley to do the same. And then I'd like to do very brief introductions from each of you, because Ashley and I are obviously learning your names and your places you're from. And I'll say a word of introduction. I expect it'll take us 8 or 10 minutes to get through all of those intros and a brief word. And then we'll really hand it over to you, because we called this a listening session so that Ashley and I could listen. So I'll say just a word about my own background. I am a lifelong Presbyterian. My father is a Presbyterian minister, now retired in Northern Vermont. I started seminary in 1985 and left after the first semester, and was able to articulate even then at age 21 that part of the reason I was leaving is because I was concerned about what I was seeing as kind of the over professionalization of the function of being church, and that I thought the church in the Presbyterian system needed to depend at least as much on committed, what are now called ruling elders, as it did on what were then called ministers of word and sacrament. So in fact, I have found a vocation in the church in spite of having left seminary so early. I spent 20 years on the US-Mexico border, creating a nonprofit organization called Border Links and growing it to a staff of about 30 to do education, experiential education for folks who didn't know much about the border at a time when the border wasn't much on people's minds, as is not the case today. Then my wife and somewhere in there, I had a brief stint for a couple of years as the moderator of the General Assembly. That was an amazing opportunity. And then I worked for 2 years full-time as the director of the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, their first full-time employee in their, at that time, I think 65-year history. And I then left that area and went to Stony Point, New York, where my wife Kitty and I became the co-directors of Stony Point Center for the last 12 years up until last fall, when the pandemic brought an unexpected halt to our positions there. So that's just a little bit about me. I have my experience at Stony Point is what laid the groundwork for my particular interest in the work of healing and repair. That is language I use often when I'm talking about the work of reparations. And it also laid the groundwork for my interest in active response to climate change and the challenges of climate change, and kind of opened my eyes to questions around full equity and inclusion for all people in the life of the church, whether that means folks who are not cisgender. Ashley and I were talking last week about language that we throw around, and she's been working on putting up some definitions on our website for folks. But cisgender refers to those of us who are born and raised and are comfortable with the gender we were assigned at our birth. And so I've had my eyes opened to the spectrum around gender expression, gender identity, and that's been quite remarkable for me over the last several years. And every time I think that I've had the last conversation I'm going to need to have about ways in which I experience privilege as a person who is white and male and heterosexual and cisgender and born in the United States and has a Western education with a university degree and all those things, then somebody invariably comes along and says, yeah, but Rick, here's another piece of the puzzle that you're missing. So that's a little bit of my life history. And I'll ask Ashley to give a brief story of her own history, and then we'll ask each of you to do brief introductions.
Thanks, Rick. And yeah, I haven't even stopped having those conversations about my own privilege, so I can't imagine you having stopped on yours. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you. My name is Reverend Ashley DeTar Birt. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My background originally, I went to school for creative writing and for theater, and have done some things of those. I have a bachelor's in creative writing. I have a master's in theater in addition to my MDiv, which I got from Union Theological in New York City, which is how I ended up in New York. I'm in the Bronx now. I have a background in something called Deliberative Democracy, which sort of the elevator pitch of that is taking a topic of great debate or controversy and measuring what opinions people might have on it, and then giving them the opportunity to learn more about it, to read articles, to become more educated, and to have discussions with people who might share their opinions or might have totally different opinions or might fit somewhere in the middle, and for them to learn and grow and listen to each other, and then afterwards seeing how those opinions change. And so I did work with that for a few years. I did some work with the reproductive justice organization for a little while, and I have a lot of work in the church. I have been a Sunday school teacher, a youth leader, a director of Christian education, and a ultimately a pastor for children, youth, and families. I've been ordained for about
I can get another room to go
3.5
like
years
you.
now.
Oh, that's okay. 'Cause I don't know how long I'm gonna stay on
I'm gonna
here.
pause for a second. There we go. I've been ordained for about 3.5 years now. I spent the past about 6.5 years working at a church in New York City at Rutgers Presbyterian. I left there in October 2020. I now work with an organization called Beloved Arise, which is a national organization for LGBTQ youth of faith, particularly Christian youth. I am their program coordinator. I also am the co-moderator for the board of More Light Presbyterians, which, if you don't know, is an organization within our denomination that works not only towards the full inclusion of LGBTQ folk within the Presbyterian Church, but also looking at the various intersections and how that works along with race, how that works along with class, how that works with age, how that works with immigration or refugee status, things of that nature. And looking not only just to find places for LGBTQ people in the church, but to really recognize that the church is a place of abundance and that God's kingdom is really created for all of us and that we can all work together in that. I am also on the task force for the disparities facing Black women and girls. I am on the racial equity advocacy advisory, committee for the denomination as well. And I also am serving on the design team for our upcoming General Assembly. And like I said, I live in New York City, here in the Bronx, with my wife, who is also an ordained minister. She is a Unitarian, and we love her anyway. And so that is a little bit about me. And I do not have the pleasure of knowing most of you, and I'm looking so forward to getting to know more about you. Um, like we said, this is a listening session. I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to hear where you're coming from. So I cannot wait to learn all about you. So here we go.
Thank you, Ashley. So I'm going to go around my screen and I'll call names and just ask if you could give us just a brief word of context, whatever you feel is important in 15 or 20 seconds to share with Ashley and myself so that we know a little bit about how you're connected and what your passions or your interests are. So I've got in my upper screen on my left is Raleigh. Could you go ahead, Raleigh?
Hi, my name is Raleigh Meeks. I'm from Lavelle Presbyterian in Lewis County, New York. Been a member here for 12 years, and I have been an elder on and off ever since I arrived here. At present, I am the chairman of the Mission Outreach and Communication Committee. One of my passions is our Stone Soup monthly meal for the community. I've been heading that up probably for the past 7 years. Other than that, that's Raleigh.
That's exactly the kind of thing we're looking for, Raleigh. Just a little bit about who you are. Thank you. Martha?
Marty Miller. I am honorably retired from Utica Presbytery and living in South Central Ohio. Thank you, Zoom. Larry might put me on the inactive list if I don't check in once in a while. And I am interested in this particular justice ministry. I emailed Larry this morning and said it sounds like about the most exciting thing I've heard coming from the institutional church in over 25 years. So go for it.
Thank you, Marty. It's thrilling to meet you. Larry, I'm going to skip over you on my screen and go to Katie and Carol.
We're fighting about who's going to go first. I'm Katie Boardman. I teach in the graduate program for museum studies, both science and history in Cooperstown here, part of SUNY Oneonta. I mention that because of the values that the program has and the directions that a lot of museums are going these days, and education in general, everything from empathy to immigration to reparations to decolonization, intersectionality, you name it. But I'm also not active right now, but I'm an elder from the Presbyterian Church in Cooperstown, and I'm becoming active again as the director of music. I have been pushed into being the tech guru, kind of yelling and screaming for the past bunch of months.
Thanks, Katie.
And I'm her wife. I'm Menno Quaker Presbyterian and a palliative care physician. And recently did reflections on COVID. And will be involved in our nominating committee, looking at what kind of leadership we might want in the church.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Jean?
Jean Kumbalik, pastor at First Pres in Utica. And the church has always been concerned about justice. I'm concerned about justice. That's one piece of this. The other piece is personal, that justice issues are things I live with the situations of my children. And I'm concerned about, they're not far away. They may not be my next door neighbor, or they may be, but they're within my family. They're not far away. So I'm really concerned about what we do for education and enhancement of peace and justice issues.
Thanks, Jean. Elizabeth, we'll go all the way to California.
There we go. I'm Elizabeth Smith, and I am the CRE at Forest Presbyterian Church, way up in the North Country in Lyons Falls. And I was born in Kansas. I was raised in the military, and I settled here when I turned 21 and have grown up in the Presbyterian Church ever since. And I'm very grateful to be a part of this presbytery. I've learned a great deal and am here continuing to learn more and understand more as time goes on. So thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Zig?
Yes, I'm Zig Malawicki. I'm elder at New Hartford Presbyterian Church. I'm chair of the Personnel Committee. Actually, today, it's ironic, today is my third year anniversary of being retired from the House of Good Shepherd. It's a large multi-tiered treatment center for children and families, children who have been traumatized, removed from families for a variety of different reasons, and our work has been on integrating them back into families. I was responsible for transforming our agency into a trauma-informed care agency under a model that's called the Sanctuary Model that also embraces restorative justice and a number of other initiatives.
That sounds like a conversation I would love to entertain with you at some point, Zig. Victor.
Victor McCusick, I'm the pastor in Whitesboro. Rick, I think I met you about the time you left seminary. So it's been a wonderful friendship for over 35 years. So it's really exciting for me that you're coming to Utica Presbytery, or a potential to be doing this great justice ministry on behalf of Utica Presbytery, on behalf of the church in general. besides my interest in social justice in this program, I come at this from a very interesting, or I have an interest in the fact that our churches are dying, and this is leaving the church with these large buildings, and wanting to see that to be a lasting legacy for our church in a very constructive way, and kind of like going through Good Friday to Resurrection, looking forward to see what the new reality of the resurrection looks like.
Thanks, Victor. Barbara?
I'm Barbara Eppley Shuck, and I've been a lay preacher for 30 years in the Presbytery. I was moderator of the Synod. I've been moderator of the Presbytery and on the National Board of Church Women United. And I'm now back on session. My passion is mission. We're an inner city church, been involved with mission programs in there forever. And so this is something that I really live with, is how do we serve God in our daily life?
My wife used
Thank
to
you.
work for Church Women United in New York City, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, well, it's been a while since I did that, but I still have some connections.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, I was in seminary when Rick dropped out, except at a different school. And at Louisville, I was fortunate to fall under the influence of George Edwards. And because of George, I ended up at a J-term travel seminar in Central America in 1985, and then spent every Thursday morning till I graduated praying at the Federal Building in Louisville for peace in Central America. So that shaped a lot of my consciousness. And I'm also convinced that the form of this church is passing away and something new wants to be born. So I'm excited about what we might do. Oh, and I've been ordained for 34 years and have done a lot of stuff with the church.
Thanks, Sam. Joyce, I see there are two of you there, but you'll have to identify each other for me.
Hi, I'm Joyce LeClaire from Boonville. I'm the clerk of session in Boonville Presbyterian Church and have been for about 4.5 years now. And we're really just interested in just exactly what kind of plans are in coming in shape. And Susan is here. She can speak for herself.
I remember my name.
Yeah.
My name is Sue LeClaire. I'm also at the Boonville Presbyterian Church as treasurer, and honestly just trying to wrap my head around everything that's being presented. So just here to learn and listen.
That's great. I'm so glad both of you are here. Sue.
Hi, Ashley and Rick, nice to see you again. Sue Riggle, pastor at New Hartford Pres. As a follower of Jesus, I am deeply interested in doing whatever I can to help the transition into the new church. I don't know, the term midwife came to me this evening, and I think, yeah, maybe that's what I get to be part of in the kingdom of God, and that's exciting to me. I think this is an incredible opportunity for the church, Big C, and what a privilege that we in Utica have the opportunity to do something, to be part of it. I mean, who would have thunk? Utica. So I'm just glad to be here with everybody.
Thanks, Sue. Tamara?
Hi, I'm Tamara Rosano. I'm the pastor at the Little Falls First Presbyterian Church. I've been a part of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship Activist Council for 6 or 7 years now. And the issues of racial and gender and economic disparity and oppression have been really important to me since '93 when I started doing the work in college. And my wife and I live in Little Falls, which is a very conservative space. And we recently hung a huge Black Lives Matter sign on our church, and we've already had someone come into our building and put something up about it in a negative way. So these issues are really important. And as I echo what Jean said, like they're right here, they're our neighbors, and this is what's happening. And so for us to be able to engage and have conversation about how to move the church forward and actually be the hands and feet in ways that are more than just good sermons and good education, I think is really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you for the work you're doing. More to be shared there too. Let's see, we're down to Rick.
Is it the top of that that's alive?
Yeah.
And should I cut it way back?
All right, I'm
No,
in a
don't
different
touch
place
it.
on my screen than you have me. I'm Rick Riggle. I pastor the Presbyterian Church in Ilion, another small and conservative community. I'm also the moderator, and a little over a year ago, Larry and I sat at lunch, and Larry asked me what I wanted to accomplish during my year as moderator. At that point in time, Black Lives Matter was like the top story in the news. And I said to Larry, sometimes we get to choose our path, and sometimes our path is chosen for us. And so I really feel like somewhere since even a year ago, the feeling that this is where God is taking us, this is important work that we can hope somebody else does, but that's not really how God calls us. So I feel like this is a culmination of a year of things that have happened, and I am incredibly excited that this is where we have come to. So thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Ray?
Yeah, my name is Ray Tucker. I'm a retired electrical engineer from Air Force Research Lab. I'm a member of Session and the Session's representative to the Presbytery. Normally, I deal mainly with building and grounds things, but this is obviously a totally different area for us and for me. Sam Pendergrast is our past pastor, and we're about to call a new pastor. We're up to the meeting of the church to approve the call in a week or so. Along that line, I have some sad news, and that is that your soon-to-be newest pastor, Edwina Landry's daughter, has lost a baby, or is about to lose her baby in pregnancy. So your prayers for her in this time. Look forward to finding out what we can do. We believe we are an open church. We have members of Black, Asian, Bosnian in our congregation. Our mission group does work with the cooks for the Rome Rescue Mission. We do backpacks and bundles, backpacks for the children. Teens were at school. We have a mission closet where we have clothing that is essentially free to anyone in need. And we need to know what we don't know, and of course there's an unlimited number of things that we can do, but we're not sure where we should go further.
Wow, thank you, Ray, and thank you for the news about Edwina's daughter. So I expect all of us will hold her in prayer. Kara, are you there?
Yes, I am. I am an elder at New Hartford Presbyterian Church, and I am head of the mission committee. And we just delivered almost 100 hygiene kits to Rome to be sent off. And we had 12 left over that were hidden in my car, and I gave them to the warming center with the permission of my committee, to the warming center in Utica, which is a wonderful, wonderful place too. So I'm pleased to be here.
Nice. Thank you, Kara. John.
I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church, an elder, have been on and off for the last few decades. And all I have to say is that, like Fraser used to say, I'm listening.
That's great. Thank you, John. Thanks for being, that's First Pres in Utica, John?
Correct.
Great, thank you. Lynn or Dick or both of you, are you there?
I'm here.
Great.
Dick Miley. I'm an elder at Whitesboro Presbyterian Church, which is just outside of Utica. I've been a member of the church and presbytery for 25 years. I'm a retired math teacher. Most people cringe when they hear that, mathematics. And I'm chair of the mission committee at Whitesboro Presbyterian. And Marty Miller, you probably don't remember me. Is Marty still on? Anyway.
Yes, I do. I certainly do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Sure.
Good to see you again. You guided us through a search process.
Well, I hope we worked out okay.
Yeah, it did. She's moved on to Pittsburgh, actually. She retired. But
Well,
okay.
good enough.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Dick. And last one on my screen is Michelle. I think we've lost one person. So Michelle.
Hello. I'm a member of First Presbyterian Church in Rome, New York. I'm part of the session, and I've been leading the committee to find our new pastor the last few years, and just that journey itself has opened my eyes to all of the change that really needs to happen in order for churches to not just survive, but thrive. And I'm just so excited and grateful to be talking about equity and inclusion, inclusivity, and embracing interfaith worship, in my opinion, is the only way to move forward. So I'm just so very grateful to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So listen, that took longer than I expected, and it was exactly what we needed, I think. It's certainly Ashley and I needed it. So I'm grateful to all of you for just hearing a little bit about your connections. I'm going to give you my 1-minute elevator speech about what we think we're doing, and then we're going to shut up and just ask you to speak no more than once, and to remember that there are others, and we have about a half hour. We're committed to stopping at 7 o'clock. I'll say before I begin that Ashley and I are entirely open to further dialogue with any of you by email or in person on phone or Zoom individually, if you have further questions when we finish up today. But we'll be taking notes. We are not going to try and respond this evening to any of your questions. We are in the process of shaping a frequently asked questions document that we'll put up on the website, hopefully certainly by Monday. So we'll take your information and try and figure out how to respond thoughtfully and carefully and prayerfully to that information, and then put some stuff up so that you can find it. And maybe we'll ask Rick or someone to send out another email to the presbytery saying, here are some updates if you all want to check them out. So here's my 1-minute elevator speech. When people ask what I'm about at this point in my life, I tell them that when I left Stony Point Center, I had been so convicted by my experience of trying to build intentional and diverse and multicultural, multiracial, multi-faith, fully open and inclusive and equitable community and that my greatest commitment is at this point in my life is to do everything I possibly can to move the church, the broader church, in that direction. And that I was interested in finding a place to work where I would not be directing a group of people, but rather I would be in partnership with others or led by others who are people of color, Black, Indigenous, or people of color, which is language we also use often, BIPOC. And that I would be interested in trying to create a small organization to help the church work on those questions. At the invitation of Larry and Naomi, I think, was involved in those early conversations, and several others. It turned into a conversation over the last several months with the coordinating council at Presbytery of Utica. And along in there somewhere, Ashley, whom I had known for several years and who I knew to be on a similar path in terms of her own interest and journey, decided to kind of bring this all together to create our vision for the Center for Jubilee Practice. The Center for Jubilee Practice is designed intentionally to try and move Presbyterian churches that are prepared to be bold and to take action as a witness, not just in their own community and a witness to their own, the life of their own community, but as a witness to the broader church about the importance of recognizing historic harm that has been experienced by particularly Native American people in the United States and African-American people in the United States, but also by many, many other categories of people who have been decentered in the broader culture, and also by the land itself, the earth itself. Our expression of dominion over the land has, in too many instances, as a people, we have wrought pretty remarkable destruction. And so my interest is to spend what time I've got left as an active participant in this process to try and help move the church. Larry helped me with a concept in January that I have found fascinating, and that is the idea that Simon Sinek puts forward, that every change always follows the same bell curve. There are the early adopters who tend to lead in any decision. They're the innovators. I'm sorry, these are actually the early innovators. They're the ones like Steve Jobs, just to name one example, right, who are putting the new ideas out there. And then there's this category that Sinek calls early adopters, usually about 10%, but we know that if you can broaden that category of early adopters to more like 20% of the population, 18 to 20%, that others will follow. These are the people who are willing to stand in line for the first Star Wars movie or the next iPhone version, right? Or in the church, the folks who are willing to kind of jump at the early opportunities to live into some new expression of the way the gospel is working itself out in the life of our community. Then there's the broad middle of that bell curve, up and down, about 70% of the population that Sinek calls that, I don't even know what he calls them actually, just that broad middle, folks who tend to be open. They're not closed to the ideas, but they've got a lot of questions and concerns, and they're not going to jump all that quickly. They want to know somebody else has tried it and that it's working. And then finally, the laggards, who Sinek says tongue in cheek, are the folks who would still be using a rotary dial telephone if they possibly could, right? So, and he said every change begins with those early adopters broadening to the point where the broad middle can say, okay, that's a safe enough idea that I want to try it too. And our mistake is that we often focus our energy on the broad middle and not on the early adopters. So the goal of the Center for Jubilee Practice is to come alongside presbyteries and Presbyterian churches, and hopefully churches in other denominations as well eventually, to accompany them in the work of adopting a practice of healing and repair, where we talk openly about harm that has been caused in the name of Christianity over certainly the last several hundred years on our continent, and work through those questions in a way that is healing for both all of us who identify as white and Christian today, and then look for clear ways to make reparation in a way that can be transformative for the whole community. And it's our suspicion, Ashley's and mine, that this will in fact transform the church. And one other book that I'll mention that I suspect we'll want to do some reading together in the presbytery if the way opens for it, is a book that has had a huge impact on many of us called My Grandmother's Hands. It's fairly recently published by Resmaa Menakem. And Resmaa Menakem talks about the ways in which trauma gets internalized over generations so that we don't eventually even know what trauma it is we're responding to. That when we feel shame about something, it may be shame that actually goes back generations in our family, and we've all found ways to kind of work around it, and it gets passed generation to generation. And really, we're talking about that kind of healing. How do we work on that kind of healing with white communities? Communities who have identified as people who carry dominant culture privilege and status, and also communities of those who are BIPOC and those who have been decentered and marginalized in the broader church, and also anybody in between. So I'll just say that much, and then invite you all to share with us both what excites you and also what concerns or questions you have that you're afraid we may not be paying attention to. The last thing I'll say is that Larry and Ashley and I have said a number of times to each other that the Presbytery of Utica in many ways seems like an ideal place to try this out, because in many ways it is the heartland. It's a classic example of the heartland Presbyterian church, right? There are a lot of churches at different stages. Many of your churches are rural. Many of your churches are wrestling with these questions, whether they know it or not. And if we can make some of these practices come alive in this presbytery, what a remarkable witness we are convinced it could be for the broader church as well. So we imagine that if we were to kick this thing off midsummer, as we hope, that Ashley and I would be spending a quarter to a third of our time focused on work of accompaniment directly in the Utica Presbytery, and then something like 2/3 of our time out in the rest of the country, trying to encourage others to adopt similar practices. And Ashley, I should not hand this over without asking you to just say a word about that other piece of our work around brave and courageous space that you've been anxious to make sure that we not lose sight of.
Yep, I'm going to try and say this as quickly as possible. And if you have questions about it, it's a listening session. You can certainly ask them. So the other part of this that we want to make sure that we do is that we don't accidentally recenter whiteness. And so part of that work is creating what we're calling brave spaces, recognizing there's not really any such thing as a truly safe space, but creating spaces where people can be vulnerable, where people can come together and sort of affinity groups, groups for people of color, even more specifically groups for, say, African Americans, groups for Asian Americans, groups for folks within the LGBT community, as some examples, without dominant voices present, so that there can be conversations around healing, around need, around self-reflection and self-determination, so that while there are these other conversations happening sort of outside that are dealing with ideas of reconciliation and reparations and things like that, that they're also happening for these communities themselves, that they are able to do their own work and figure out their own needs, and perhaps even be able to say, hey, here are the things that we need in order to create healing and restoration with other communities. Here are the ways in which we've been hurt that we would like addressed. And so that is one of the things that we are working on, and I'm going to stop talking now because I want to hear you talk.
So please raise your hand electronically, or I can see everyone on the screen. If you have something, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll recognize you. This is when I always make a joke about what I've learned by living with a Quaker spouse for the last 30 years. That I can sit with some quiet for a little bit.
Barb Shuck has her hand raised.
Great. Let's go to Barb and then to Katie and Carol.
I guess my practical side is having a problem just trying to figure out how it all works. I like the idea and I respect the people who are doing it. I just don't understand it. So if you can explain it to dummies, I'm here.
Thanks, Barb. We will come back to that. You're not the only one to have asked that question,
Okay.
and we'll reflect on that some more, certainly in the FAQ sheet. Katie?
I think this is a good time for the Cooperstown congregation actually to be involved with this, because we are a congregation that is in a reshaping mode right now, with a lot of help, with a lot of great help. And I think that, you know, our clay is pretty malleable right now. And so there's a lot of possibilities, I think, for folks to be involved with this. I wanted to say that, but I also wanted to say that the brave and courageous spaces and the safe spaces. And I was just having a conversation with this about one of my grad students the other day, that there needs to be people there to help be a support for the people who are being brave. That when you stick your neck out or you share something, you just don't want it to be crickets. You don't want to walk away from the circle and think, well, what did I just do? And nobody seemed to care. And so just keeping in mind that there's a ministry, and maybe it's a ministry of accompaniment and listening, but making sure that folks are supported in those situations, because they are sticking their neck out. And maybe there's a role for some of us in that.
Thank you, Katie. Ray, are you trying to speak? Go ahead. I'm sorry, I missed your hand first. Go ahead.
This is Ray from First Rome. In our talk, in my introductory talk, I mentioned that, you know, we have a minority, some minorities in our congregation, possibly but we have trouble reaching out to other people. I mean, I'm also, my wife and I are also very much involved in community theater, the Capitol Theater in Rome, and you can't be involved in theater without having LGBTQ people around you. And we have very good friends who are both gay and lesbian, and they are unchurched. They feel put off by the formal churches of the day. We also have people in the community. We're a downtown church. Well, the downtown around our church is not the members who are in our church. They are the minorities and the poorer folks, I guess, in town, who think that our church is some edifice that shouldn't be, the people shouldn't go to, that are poor and downtrodden or whatever, except if they're visiting to pick up stuff at the mission closet or the rummage sale. But they don't dare set foot in the sanctuary. So I guess that's a real quandary for us. We wish to be open. We believe we are open to anyone who is willing to attend or meet with us or do anything with us, but we're not sure where do you go from here, or where do you go from there? And so hopefully the Jubilee organization will be able to help. And as you said, a third of your time you hope to spend in the Utica Presbytery. Well, I think we all need that guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. That's really helpful. Yeah, Marty.
If this proposal is approved by Presbytery, and I assume that's what's coming up on the 25th of May, What do you think? I'd like to hear from both Ashley and Rick what your next steps would be.
Great. Okay. That's a great question. Let's see, Zig, I see your hand.
Well, my question is along that lines. I think it was a two-pronged question. Question for Rick and Larry, what do you need to know today for making the decision at the end of the month? And what churches be asked or expected to do, at least initially? I think we can agree in general conceptual terms, but what specifically, like for example, it appears that there are going to be budgetary issues that might need to, and how this is going to be funded, etc. So, is there a request for churches to contribute to this, for example, whether in terms of person, in terms of money, whatever? So those were the questions.
That's really great. Thank you, Zig. We've got those and we'll come back to them, knowing that I'm hearing you really directing some of the specifics of that to Rick Riggle and to Larry Beasley. Yes? Okay. Elizabeth.
I'm curious in regards to Zig as well as Marty. And I think education, because the churches, I know I need more education in regards to all of this. And I know that my congregation alike would need more education into understanding the language. I know I did go through your website. It's amazing. And I appreciate it very much. But I still need to have an understanding, because if we're asking our churches to get on board with this, which my church is an open church as well, I would like to be, and I've had conversations with people from the LGBTQ community, but I'm still naive, and I don't mind saying that, and I need to have an understanding so that I don't go around being more harmful than helpful in my language. So if I need that education, I know that others do too.
Yeah, that's that's great stuff. Thank you, Elizabeth. These are really good. I'm gonna spend the weekend. Y'all are like creating my homework clearly for the weekend. So Tamara?
I just wanted to ask for clarification about engagement with other groups that are already in existence. I know last time we had the meeting, you talked about this being kind of a separate thing that would engage with a variety of faith traditions and non-faith traditions. Will there be space to do things like with More Light or other existing organizations like PPF and things like that within the Presbyterian Church and within other denominations?
Yeah, great question and easy to answer. So we'll come back to that too. Thanks, Tamara. Joyce? I assume it was Joyce. No?
Both of us, yeah.
Okay, the duo.
Right. So this is Sue. So one of the questions that I had as well is thinking about the more rural communities within our entire presbytery, of one of which I live in. So I completely do believe and do understand that these things exist everywhere. I don't think that we're in our own little bubble. But I do think that there is a possibility that the needs of the city may be different than those of the more rural communities. So I'd just like to know more information about how that would work.
Great. Thank you, Sue.
And this is George. Add to that, we've talked about this at session. We did bring it up. We did talk about it. Boonville is a long way from Utica, as far as most people feel in Utica. And our session, it looks at the money aspect, and also I have to honestly say, how's it going to help Boonville and the people there? I know that might be sounding selfish, but it is the question that was raised. What would it do for, and as Sue said, the more rural churches?
Yeah, thank you. Others? Dick, was that little smiley face asking to speak? Maybe not. And Zig, your hand is still up. Is that intentional? Great, go ahead.
Yes. The only other question I had was whether there would be any efforts through the Jubilee Center to integrate with any other initiatives going on. For example, the Community Foundation in the Utica area has pledged $10 million over the next 10 years to deal with racial equality and social justice. So that would be the other question of, does that integrate with anything else that's going on in the world around our churches?
Wow, I didn't know that yet. That's really great to hear. So yes, we'll come back to that. Thanks. These are really great questions. Anything else?
Go
ahead, Sue.
Hi, Rick. So would you like to provide sort of a curriculum? Or I know we have suggested readings that we can refer to. Can you give us a way to begin this conversation with the wider congregation? Because our context is very white. Does not mean that we don't have difficulties in the community. It just means we are very white. And I need all the help I can get with it.
I would
go ahead, Kara.
I would just back Sue up. I'm in her congregation and on the session that our community right here is very white, and it's very difficult to attract people of minorities or whatever into this church that is steeped in this community that is very kind of upscale and white. How do we do that?
Great, thanks, Kara. I see Sue first, and then Marty, and then Rick.
I'm going to need to jump off in a minute for another meeting, but I want to clarify also that I'm not as concerned about attracting people into our church. Of course, I always want our churches to grow, but I want to know how to help educate my people to broaden their understanding, open their minds to the greater message of the gospel.
Great, thank you. I think, who did I say was next? Marty? Yeah, go ahead, Marty, and then Rick.
Rick, you referred to the diversity of Utica Presbytery. Very true. It's there, not only urban and rural, but it is conservative and liberal. It is, therefore, I would like to make a small suggestion in that the theological statement that you have on your website perhaps be fleshed out a little more, and yes, some scriptural references.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
Being in one of those rural communities that is white, when I have talked about this with my people, the answer I get is that the answer that I need an answer for is, we are not prejudiced and it doesn't affect us here. I need an answer to that helps them see that doesn't mean that you're a part of the solution. Just, you may not be prejudiced, but that doesn't make you a part of the solution. So I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Great, thank you. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Are there any other questions that folks want to put on the table for us to work on? Let's see, Dick, go ahead.
Yes, regarding disposition of assets and so on for churches that face closing. My understanding is that PCUSA has some resources or people available to assist in this process. So how will JCTP, or whatever the order is, articulate with those resources already available?
Great, thank you.
And I have another comment. We also, our church is surrounded by rental properties. We have maybe one or two members of our church who are from the immediate neighborhood. How do you get the people in the neighborhood welcome to come into your, step foot in your building? Years ago, we had an Easter egg hunt or roll, and my wife and I brought horses down and everything. We had all kinds of people passing through the church. Wonderful, but nothing came of it. We missed, I don't know what we did wrong, but after the event was over, that was it. So we must have missed something.
Thank you, Dick. Okay, folks, I'm going to ask Ashley if she has any comments or things that you would like to say, Ashley.
Yeah, my comment is that I see Katie's hand up.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Katie. I missed it. Oh, you're muted, Katie.
You're muted, right? Just a quick comment about this, that all of these things that we're talking about and trying to connect with communities and bridge gaps are exactly what the most progressive of the museums in this country are doing right now. Same conversation, same discussions. So there's some good, I think there's some good synergy there. There's some good tools that we're learning. International Sites of Conscience has a dialogue process. There's lots of dialogue processes out there, but it's pretty easy to learn and it's good to use. We have some folks who could help with that. And I think that there could be some possibilities there. We've certainly done some things with our congregation and the graduate program in the past. They're already involved with folks at the refugee center. So I'll just put that out there. There's some possibilities there.
Can you repeat the name of that organization? International what of conscience?
International Sites of Conscience. Their offices are in New York City, but their museums are global. It's everything from Holocaust sites to other places that are concerned about justice issues, basically.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ashley, you want to say a few words and then I'll wrap us up and close us with prayer.
I am so excited by so much of this. Truly, like, you do not understand how these questions and comments, how much these questions and comments truly touch me in terms of engagement, in terms of how much.
And I read a whole article about it and still couldn't understand it.
Hey, Larry, can you do a mute for us, please?
You gotta love Zoom. There we go. I'm so truly excited by all of these questions and comments. I'm so truly excited by how deeply you have engaged with this and how much you have thought about it within your own context, within the context of your communities, how much you have wrestled with some of these ideas, and how honest that you have been with us. And as someone who has made a career off of education, I'm very excited by the number of questions that are essentially calls for education on this. And so I'm just so grateful for the seriousness that you've taken with this. I'm so grateful for your time, and I'm so grateful for all of your voices.
Thanks, Ashley. You know, what I want to do is go back through and share my thoughts about every one of these questions, but clearly that's not the appropriate response for what happens next. So I'm going to resist the temptation. And instead, I'm going to invite you all to come back to the website early next week. Hopefully by Monday, we'll have an FAQ section up that will include all of the questions you've asked and our responses to them. And again, invite you to be in touch with Ashley or myself. If you would like, we welcome that. Ashley, could you put our email addresses in the chat? Great, thank you. And I'll just invite you all to join me in a word of prayer as we close tonight. As we begin to pray, I invite us to just pause and center our bodies and take a few deep breaths. Breathing in the spirit that gives us life. Breathing out those things that drain life from us, for we all experience them. Breathing in the spirit. Breathing out those things that do harm and danger. Those things that linger, those things that we don't even know about. God, for this time together, we give you thanks. For this group of people and all of the people that they touch and reach in their congregations. We give you thanks. For all the people that we haven't touched directly, but that you touch all over the world. We pray tonight for them, and that your healing presence might be a part of their lives. And for the work before us, we ask for strength. For our churches are going through significant changes. Things are not the way they have been in the past. And we don't know what is coming. So God, we ask for a small measure of courage, that we might take on these challenges together, striving always to be your community, to live those things that honor and please you in active and concrete ways. Be with us now as we depart from one another. Keep us safe, not for safety's sake, but rather so that we might use our security on behalf of those who have none. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ashley and Rick.
Thank
so
you
much.
all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.